There is a shelter design that keeps you warm in temperatures that kill. Not with electronics, not with propane, not with a sleeping bag that costs $300, but with a sheet of plastic, a reflective blanket, and a small fire. It raises the temperature inside by over 40 degrees F. In conditions where frostbite starts in 10 minutes, people have slept through the night in total comfort. Arctic explorers used it, military survival schools teach it, and indigenous peoples perfected it over thousands of years. It weighs less than 2 lb and fits inside any backpack pocket. It costs less than $15 to build from materials at any hardware store. And it outperforms sleeping bags, insulated tents, and heated gear that cost 20 times more. So why has almost no one heard of it? Because the outdoor gear industry generates $90 billion a year, selling you the solution to cold weather camping, sleeping bags, insulated jackets, heated blankets, portable heaters, four-season tents, and an endless cycle of annual upgrades. A shelter that solves cold with physics and fire cannot be packaged, branded, or placed on a retail shelf with a barcode. And what cannot be sold cannot be marketed. And what cannot be marketed slowly ceases to exist in the public mind until nobody remembers it was ever there. They did not ban this shelter from campgrounds or national parks. They did something far worse. They made you forget it ever existed. This is the story of the super shelter, the cold weather survival system that the outdoor gear industry prays you never learn to build. Before we open this vault, if these stories matter to you, the bell and the subscribe button are the best way to preserve this knowledge. Share it with someone who needs to remember what they made us forget. Now let us go back to where this story begins. Saskatchewan, Canada, 1940. A boy named Morris Kakanski is born to Polish immigrant parents on a remote farm deep in the Canadian prairie, a place with no electricity, no running water, where the closest town requires a 2-hour horse-drawn wagon ride through open wilderness. Winter temperatures on that isolated farmstead regularly drop below 40 degrees, the exact point where Fahrenheit and Celsius converge into the same terrifying number. This boy walks 7 miles to school every single day on a dirt bush road that cuts through the heart of the boreal forest, past wolves lurking in the dark tree line, past bears crossing frozen riverbanks, through snowdrifts that reach his waist and sometimes his chest. His father, a carpenter and World War I veteran from Poland, teaches him something no school curriculum covers: how to stay alive when the cold is trying to kill you. Not with expensive gear, but with birch bark, spruce boughs, fallen timber, and fire built on frozen ground. Morris grows up watching the indigenous peoples of the Canadian North, the Cree, the Dene, the Inuit, peoples who had thrived in these brutal winters for thousands of years before any European explorer set foot on the continent. They did not have Gore-Tex. They did not have synthetic down insulation rated to specific temperature thresholds. They did not have lithium battery-heated vests that retail for $250 at outdoor specialty stores. They had an understanding of heat, reflection, wind, moisture, and shelter geometry that modern thermal engineering and material science is only now beginning to fully appreciate and scientifically validate through controlled laboratory studies. Morris reads everything he can find about wilderness survival from every culture and era of human history. At 14, he moves to Prince Albert and practically lives in the public library, becoming obsessed with an old boy's scout manual and the Ashley Book of Knots, saving 15 oars, a significant sum for a farm boy in 1954, to buy his own copy. In 1960, he enters the University of Saskatchewan to study anthropology, psychology, and geology. But his real education happens deep in the frozen woods. He resolves to master true wilderness survival. Not the kind taught in comfortable workshops, but the kind that keeps you alive when all your gear fails and the temperature keeps dropping. By 1972, Morris becomes an associate professor at the University of Alberta, where he teaches outdoor education for the next 25 years. But he does something that no other professor in the country dares to attempt. He walks alone into the boreal forest in the dead of a Canadian winter and stays there for weeks at a stretch, sleeping on beds of spruce boughs in waist-deep snow, testing shelter designs while temperatures plummet to -30 and below, measuring heat loss from different fire configurations reflected off rock walls, snowbanks, and improvised reflective surfaces. And somewhere in those dark, frozen forests, through years of freezing, testing, failing, and refining, he discovers something that changes everything we think we know about staying warm outdoors. The real problem with cold weather camping is not poor insulation, it is radiation. Stay with me because the science behind this is as elegant as it is devastating for the gear industry. And it will change how you think about every cold night you have ever spent outdoors. Here is what most people, including most experienced campers and even many survival instructors, do not understand about how the human body loses heat. Your body loses heat through four distinct mechanisms: conduction through the ground pulling warmth downward, convection from wind and air movement, stealing heat from your skin, evaporation from sweat and breath carrying thermal energy away, and radiation, the invisible silent killer that nobody in the gear industry talks about. Your sleeping bag traps dead air to slow convective heat loss, and your sleeping pad blocks conductive loss to the frozen ground beneath you. But radiation, which accounts for up to 50% of your total heat loss on a cold, clear night, is completely ignored by almost everything in your expensive gear kit. Your body radiates infrared energy constantly, like a space heater broadcasting warmth into the void of the night sky. And that invisible energy just leaves your skin and vanishes upward into the atmosphere, literally escaping into the cosmos. The sky on a clear winter night functions as a massive heat sink at nearly absolute zero, relentlessly pulling your infrared energy upward with nothing in your tent or sleeping bag designed to stop it. Because that is simply not what insulation does. No sleeping bag on Earth, not even one that costs $800 and is filled with ethically sourced 900 fill power goose down, can stop radiative heat loss because insulation addresses conduction and convection, but is completely transparent to infrared radiation. The gear industry has always known this, but they have never once mentioned it on a product label, in a marketing campaign, or in any of the thousands of gear review videos that fill your YouTube recommendations every winter. This is the part that should make every cold weather camper absolutely furious. Stay with me, because what comes next is the science they buried under $90 billion of annual retail revenue. In 1964, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, developed a revolutionary material to solve this exact radiation problem in the vacuum of outer space, where temperature differentials between sun and shade can exceed 500 degrees. They created what we now call the Mylar blanket, a thin sheet of polyester film coated with vaporized aluminum that reflects up to 97% of all radiant heat. And I need you to sit with that number for a moment because it changes the entire equation of cold weather survival. 97%, meaning almost all of the invisible infrared energy leaving your body gets bounced directly back toward you instead of disappearing into the frozen night sky above your tent. NASA used this reflective film on the Apollo lunar module that carried astronauts to the surface of the moon in 1969, on the Skylab space station when it was dangerously overheating in 1973, and on virtually every space mission launched since that date. The military adopted it immediately, creating the casualty blanket, a reinforced version with an olive drab backing that combat medics carried in every field kit from Vietnam forward, used to prevent hypothermia in wounded soldiers bleeding out in frozen combat zones around the world. Marathon runners at every major race on Earth wrap themselves in these shiny silver sheets after crossing the finish line to prevent their core temperature from crashing after extreme exertion. You have seen them on television hundreds of times without ever thinking about what they mean for camping. The technology was never classified, never restricted, never a government secret. It was published openly, available to anyone with $3 at any gas station or camping store, and astonishingly effective at doing exactly what it was designed to do. And yet, the outdoor gear industry spent decades acting as though reflective shelter technology simply did not exist as a primary component of cold weather camping. Because here's the science that makes their entire business model deeply uncomfortable. Published research in the journal Wilderness and Environmental Medicine has documented that reflective shelters significantly reduce radiative heat loss compared to conventional camping setups across multiple controlled field conditions and climate zones. Military research institutes across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Scandinavia have independently confirmed that properly constructed reflective shelters can maintain survivable internal temperatures in ambient conditions that would otherwise be lethal to an unprotected human being within 3 to 6 hours of exposure. Field practitioners working in the bushcraft tradition of Kochanski have measured temperature differentials of 40 to 80 degrees F inside a properly built super shelter compared to outside ambient temperature, meaning when it is 0 outside, it can be 40 to 85 degrees inside your shelter. Warm enough to sleep in a light fleece. All of that without batteries, without fuel canisters, without a single piece of gear that needs to be recharged at a wall outlet, replaced every 3 seasons, or repurchased annually when the manufacturer releases the updated model with a new proprietary insulation name. Now compare this to the standard industry solution for cold weather camping that fills every outdoor retail store from floor to ceiling. A 4-season tent rated for extreme cold costs between $500 and $2,000, depending on the brand, capacity, and whatever proprietary fabric technology name the marketing department invented this year. A winter sleeping bag rated to minus 20 degree F costs between $300 and $800 and loses up to 30% of its insulating effectiveness when it absorbs moisture over consecutive nights of use inside a sealed tent. A portable camping heater costs $100 to $400 and requires fuel canisters that must be purchased for every trip, carried in, carried out, adding weight and recurring expense that never ends as long as you keep camping. An insulated sleeping pad rated for winter, ground temperatures costs between $100 and $250 and begins to lose its thermal resistance value after 2 to 3 seasons of compression from your body weight. The total investment for the conventional approach to winter camping easily exceeds $1,000, often surpasses $2,000, and multiple components need replacing every 3 to 5 years as insulation degrades, zippers fail, waterproof coatings deteriorate, and foam compresses beyond recovery. The Super Shelter solution costs under $30 total. A roll of clear polyethylene sheeting costs $5 to $8 at any hardware store. A Mylar emergency blanket or reinforced reflective tarp costs $3 to $15, and Paracord plus duct tape together cost roughly $5 for more than you will ever need. Under $30 for a system that outperforms $2,000 of conventional gear, and the core knowledge behind it lasts your entire lifetime without a single replacement purchase. The numbers are devastating, but only devastating for the companies that need you to keep buying solutions to problems that physics already solved for free 10,000 years ago. If you have reached this far, you already know more about the physics of cold weather survival than 99% of campers who spend thousands on gear every single year without ever questioning whether the industry is selling them the best solution or simply the most profitable one. Subscribe so you do not miss the next vault, because what we open next will change how you think about every night you spend outdoors. Now here is where the comparison gets even worse for the companies selling you the annual upgrade to cold. The Super Shelter does not just save money, it fundamentally works better than conventional systems over time. And the reason comes down to one devastating word: moisture. A conventional tent is a closed system. It traps your body heat, yes, but it also traps every single molecule of moisture your body produces throughout the night. Your body releases between 1 and 2 pints of water vapor per night through breathing and perspiration. And inside a sealed tent, that moisture has absolutely nowhere to go except into your gear. It condenses on the tent walls, drips onto your sleeping bag, and reduces insulation efficiency with every passing hour. By the 3rd night of a winter trip, your sleeping bag can lose up to 30% of its insulating capacity from absorbed moisture alone. Down sleeping bags are especially vulnerable to this effect. Wet down clumps together, loses its loft, and a $900 sleeping bag after 3 consecutive nights of winter camping can perform like a $300 bargain model from a department store. This is not a design flaw that manufacturers are racing to fix. It is a feature of the business model, because the faster your gear degrades in the field, the sooner you replace it with the next improved version on the store shelf. The Super Shelter eliminates this moisture problem entirely because it is an open system. The front faces the fire, air circulates freely, and moisture from your body and breath escapes naturally instead of being trapped against your insulation. Your bedding stays dry, your insulation maintains its loft. Your gear performs at full capacity night after night without degradation and without replacement. Morz Kochanski understood this fundamental principle better than anyone in the modern era, and he expressed it with a simplicity that bordered on poetry. Do not fight nature, work with it. A fire does not just produce heat, it produces radiant infrared energy, convective warm air, and a powerful drying effect that drives moisture away from everything in its vicinity. Three benefits that the Super Shelter captures simultaneously. The clear polyethylene plastic front allows radiant heat from the fire to enter the shelter, functioning exactly like a greenhouse window that is transparent to infrared radiation, while blocking wind and retaining warm air inside. The reflective mylar back bounces that incoming heat energy directly back toward the occupant, functioning like a parabolic mirror that concentrates warmth on the sleeping area from behind. The raised bed prevents conductive heat loss to the frozen ground, which pulls warmth from your body at a rate 4 times faster than cold air does. A devastating fact that most campers learn the hard way on their first truly cold night outdoors. Three mechanisms of heat conservation working together in a single integrated system in a shelter that weighs under 2 pounds and fits in a cargo pocket of your hiking pants. Kochanski published his findings in his landmark book Bushcraft in 1988, and it became a Canadian bestseller that has never gone out of print in nearly 4 decades. He coined the phrase that should be carved into every campsite entrance on the continent: the more you know, the less you carry. That single sentence is a direct and existential threat to an industry built entirely on the opposite principle. The less you know, the more you buy. Think about the structure of the modern outdoor gear economy. Every product is designed to address one specific problem, and every problem requires its own separate purchase with its own separate replacement cycle. You need a sleeping bag rated for a specific temperature range, but also a liner to extend that range, and a compression sack to carry it, and a pad to insulate beneath it, and a bivy sack to protect it from condensation that the tent creates. You need a 4-season tent, but also snow stakes because regular ones will not hold, and extra guy lines for wind stability, and a ground sheet to protect the floor from ice damage. Each sold separately with its own markup. You need thermal layers, base, mid, and outer shell, each from a specific brand, each with a proprietary technology name, each needing replacement every few seasons. Every single one of those products generates recurring revenue because they all wear out. They all need periodic replacement, and they all get upgraded annually with marginal improvements at premium prices. The sleeping bag market alone is worth nearly $4 billion a year globally. The entire camping and outdoor equipment industry is approaching $90 billion in annual revenue worldwide, a number that simply cannot tolerate a $15 alternative made from hardware store materials and 10,000 years of free knowledge. You cannot patent a mylar blanket stretched over sticks with a fire burning in front. You cannot trademark the physics of infrared reflection that have governed the universe since the Big Bang. And you cannot create a subscription model for survival principles that were available to every human being who ever lived. The entire economic structure of the outdoor industry requires you to believe that survival in cold conditions depends on purchasing the correct combination of branded products. The Super Shelter says otherwise. It says survival depends on understanding the correct combination of physical principles, and principles cannot be packaged, branded, marked up 400%, and sold at an outdoor retailer for $399 with a lifetime warranty. So what did the industry do about it? They did not attack the Super Shelter directly because that would draw attention to it and risk a viral backlash that would expose their entire business model to public scrutiny. Instead, they did something more elegant. They defined what camping is supposed to look like through decades of relentless marketing, through influencer campaigns, magazine spreads, and social media aesthetics that equate camping with consumption rather than knowledge. Camping became a lifestyle brand. And the currency of that brand is products, not skills, not understanding, not the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years of human survival. If you watch any mainstream camping content online, count how many videos teach you to build something versus how many teach you to buy something. The ratio is devastating, and it is absolutely not accidental. And here's the quiet part that nobody in the industry wants to discuss out loud. Park regulations in many areas restrict or outright ban open fires. And they will tell you it is entirely about fire safety, which is legitimate and critically important. Wildfire risk is real and devastating, especially in dry regions and during drought seasons. But the secondary effect is undeniable. When you eliminate fire from the equation, the only solution remaining for cold is the one hanging on a retail rack with a price tag. I need to be honest with you here. This is genuinely nuanced. Fire restrictions exist for legitimate reasons that protect forests and lives, and the super shelter requires responsible fire management, proper clearance, and experienced judgment. But the principle behind the super shelter, the understanding that radiant heat reflection and proper shelter geometry can dramatically reduce or entirely replace hundreds of dollars of manufactured gear. That knowledge is universally applicable even when you cannot build a fire. A Mylar blanket positioned behind your back in any lean-to shelter reflects your own body heat toward you, adding measurable warmth without a single flame. A clear plastic windbreak creates a greenhouse effect that can raise the temperature of a small shelter space by 10 to 15 degree F using only trapped solar or body radiation. Proper ground insulation using natural materials like leaves, grass, and evergreen boughs prevents the conductive heat loss that silently steals your warmth while you sleep and costs literally nothing if you know what to gather. These are the fundamentals, and they cost almost nothing to implement once you understand the physics. Now here is how you build the full super shelter, and pay attention because this is what they never put in a gear catalog. Find two trees roughly 8 to 10 ft apart, or drive two sturdy poles into the ground at that distance. These will be the anchor points for your entire shelter structure. Run a ridge line between them at about chest height using paracord rope or any strong cordage available. This creates the spine of the shelter that everything else hangs from. Drape a mylar blanket or reflective tarp over the ridge line on the backside of the shelter, making absolutely sure the reflective surface faces inward toward where you will sleep, and secure the bottom edges firmly with rocks, logs, or stakes so wind cannot lift it. Now stretch a sheet of clear polyethylene plastic over the front and top of the shelter, creating your greenhouse window that allows radiant heat from the fire to enter while blocking wind and retaining accumulated warm air inside the shelter space. Build a raised bed inside the shelter, and this step is absolutely critical. Never skip it. Never sleep on bare ground in cold weather because the earth conducts heat away from your body 4 times faster than the surrounding air does. Use logs laid side by side as a platform. Cover them with thick layers of evergreen boughs, dry leaves, grass, or bracken. 6 inches of natural insulation at minimum. 12 inches is ideal for serious cold. And place a sleeping pad on top if you have one. Now build your fire approximately 3 to 4 ft from the front opening of the shelter. A long log fire works best for this application. 2 thick logs laid parallel with the fire burning steadily between them, producing sustained radiant heat that projects directly into your shelter through the clear plastic window. The mylar behind you reflects that heat back, and you are now sleeping inside a heat mirror. Warmth hitting you from the front and bouncing back from behind, creating a thermal envelope that no tent in any store can replicate. One bushcraft practitioner in Northern Ontario documented maintaining interior shelter temperatures of 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while the outside air was 15 degrees below zero, an 80 degree temperature differential achieved with materials that fit inside a standard day pack. The beauty of this system extends beyond raw warmth. It actively dries your gear while you sleep. Wet boots placed near the fire opening dry completely overnight. Damp clothing hung inside the shelter dries from the combination of radiant and reflected heat. And unlike a conventional tent that traps moisture and makes everything worse, the super shelter turns your entire campsite into a functioning dryer. Morris Kochanski taught this system for over 40 years to military personnel from Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. And he trained civilian survival instructors who went on to teach thousands more, creating a quiet lineage of knowledge that spread through the bushcraft community like a whispered secret. His student Cody Lunden built super shelters in his winter survival courses at the Aboriginal Living Skills School in Arizona, proving the concept worked far beyond the Canadian boreal forest. But the technique never reached the mainstream. It never became a trending hashtag, never got featured in a gear review, never appeared in a camping magazine advertisement, because you cannot run advertisements for something made from sticks and plastic sheeting. Kochanski passed away in 2019 at the age of 79, and with him went decades of firsthand knowledge that exists now only in his books, his students, and in shelters built by people who chose understanding over purchasing. Here is what I want you to take from this vault. The solution to cold was never a better sleeping bag. It was never a more expensive tent. It was never a higher fill power rating or a proprietary insulation technology with a trademark name that changes every year. The solution to cold has been the same for 10,000 years: fire, reflection, geometry, and understanding. Your ancestors knew this. Every culture on Earth, from the Arctic to the Andes, from Scandinavia to Siberia, built shelters based on these identical physical principles. The Sami people of northern Scandinavia, the Evenki of the Siberian taiga, the Cree of the Canadian Shield, they all survived winters that would empty a modern outdoor retail store in a single weekend, carrying almost nothing and lacking for nothing, because they understood what Mors Kochanski spent his entire life teaching the world. The more you know, the less you carry. We did not lose the super shelter. We just forgot it. But forgetting is not final, and it is not permanent. The physics have not changed. Infrared radiation still bounces off aluminum at 97% efficiency. Clear plastic still allows radiant heat to pass through like a greenhouse window. Fire still burns. Earth still insulates. And the human body still radiates warmth that can be captured and redirected with $3 worth of reflective material. The knowledge slept in dusty manuals and fading memories. But knowledge does not die. Methods do not disappear. They wait for someone to remember. And now you remember. If this story changed the way you look at the gear in your pack or the cold of the night, subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the survival wisdom that the industry tried to bury. Equip your mind, not just your backpack. The next vault of forbidden knowledge opens soon.